I'm trying to minimize my paper of late, so I'm going to read off of my phone. Our first speaker is Ann Wells, who is a postdoc at the Jackson Laboratory. She joined there in 2018. She works in Dr. Greg Carter's lab. Her doctoral work was on investigating how diet, sex, and genetics interacted to affect metabolism in different organs, leading to changes in weight, energy expenditure, muscle, and fat mass, among other things. As a postdoc, she investigates how genetics and environmental factors interact to make an individual susceptible or resilient to diseases that are difficult to diagnose, such as Alzheimer's and autoimmune diseases. And Ann uses current computational methods and develops new statistical methods to do this work. I asked our speakers, because they all have impressive resumes like that, and all actually normal human beings, to give me what their favorite science-themed popular culture item is, like podcast or book or TV show. And Ann told me Doctor Who, so we have a big Doctor Who fan here. And the title of her talk is Using Computers to Dissect Complex Diseases.
Out of the way of that, but I do want to see that. Okay, and I'm going to take this off for the 5 minutes, I suppose. It's very weird to be in a room without that. Okay, so when normally you think about a biologist and images come to mind, I feel like this is what we typically think of: white coats, mice, test tubes, but this is also biology. And this is real code. So this is code I have written, and this is data on the left that is real. You can see it is ugly and messy. And of course, this is me at my computer. So using that for complex diseases, first of all, what are they? So complex diseases are very complicated in the fact that they're difficult to treat, they're difficult to diagnose, they're difficult to cure. They involve a mixture of genetics, environmental, and lifestyle factors. There is no obvious path of inheritance. So one person in your family might get it, another might miss. You could do the same exact things. It won't matter. Twin studies have shown this. There's all sorts of things. And some of these are Alzheimer's disease, autoimmune diseases, asthma, COVID. And so how do computers help with this? So computers really sit sort of in the middle. That's where I sit right now. So we get our experimental data, and then we get all of that lovely, lovely data in these massive spreadsheets, and we throw it in the computer. We do all sorts of different analyses, and hopefully we get some sort of strong biological outcome that moves us in the right direction to a treatment, to a cure, to even just being able to diagnose somebody more easily and quicker. And one of the big things that really pushed us in this direction and sort of broke open computational biology is the Human Genome Project. And so this was completed in 2003. And at the time, when we completed the Human Genome Project, and we sequenced our first human genome, it was about $1 billion, and it took about 13 years. Today, we can do it for about 1,000, and it takes about 2 days to do. So you can imagine, now that this is cost-effective, easy to do, fast, we do this all the time, which means we have lots and lots and lots and lots of data. And so as a result of this, we've now needed to have lots of computational scientists of all sorts of disciplines within that sort of big umbrella in order to analyze data and to make new computers and all sorts of things. And so for one example, we have Alzheimer's disease. And so for this, what a lot of people are doing, because approximately 65 million people as of 2022 have Alzheimer's, but we don't have a treatment. It's very difficult to diagnose. Most often, it's a guesstimate. So we say we think you have it, and we don't find out until post-mortem. So what people are doing now is they're doing things that are called neural networks, machine learning, and what all these things are doing are predicting based on graphs that we have and based on images to try to say, okay, you are going to get Alzheimer's, and so now we know this, and now we can act accordingly before you get it. We also have people working on mouse models. Half of my lab is doing that. So they're taking all sorts of genes, putting them into mice, looking at how they look. Do they look like they're cognitively impaired? That sort of thing. What I work on is autoimmune disease. And so for me, I'm creating lots of new statistical methods. So I'm looking at integrating various layers of biology and trying to find new pieces of information in order to find a biomarker or a pathway that's altered or commonalities between all of these diseases, because as you can see, there are many. And then we have COVID, of course, our favorite. And with COVID, this is a little different, and you guys probably don't think about the fact that you're looking at comp science all day, every day about COVID, but every time we check the CDC website, we look at trends over the 7 days, we look at variants, we know there's Omicron and Delta and all of these different, this is all comp sci at the core. All of these are looking at how to present the data publicly for public health, how to sequence and where's the variant, so that we know that this is different than this one, and now we can look at the virulence and all of these individual things and how sick people get. And that is all a part of data science and comp sci, and that's why this field is really broad, and that's why this is kind of high level, so you can kind of see how you can do this at various stages. And with that, I have 7 seconds, so.
So we have microphones here in the aisles. If you have a question for Anne, if you don't, I will happily fill the space, but I would much rather someone like not my voice would be a lot better for me. Until then, the slide that you had that listed all the different autoimmune disorders, is there really, like, how likely is it there's going to be a connection? What do you think?
Pretty likely.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So once you get one, you're more likely to get 2, and then you're more likely to get 3, and then you have multiple autoimmune syndrome, and then you're in a whole other category. But multiple, usually once you have 1, you have 2.
Okay. Right here.
So with what accuracy can you determine the types of things, like if somebody's going to have Alzheimer's? I mean, what if you say they are, and then you start to use all the treatments, but then they don't, or what's the accuracy of it?
I mean, that's the thing that we're trying to figure out at this point. So right now, there's not a lot of accuracy necessarily, and that's why there are people like me coming up with new methods to even analyze the data. So it's a totally other side of field of this, where I'm not analyzing data I'm given. I'm now saying, I don't like anything that's available, so I'm just going to go create something new, and I'll validate that in some form or fashion. And then we'll use that to see if we get something that's more accurate or better. And that's where a lot of the imaging has been really interesting. So I have people in my lab that are working on that, because prior to Alzheimer's, there's something called mild cognitive impairment, where it's a little scary because it's things like, oh, I don't remember where my keys are, or I forgot my book somewhere. You know, things that are kind of pretty normal, but they're coming at a rate that's not normal. And so then it's like, well, is that person going to develop Alzheimer's or not? And that's where we're trying to figure out what's the percentage, because there's plenty that don't, and then there are some that do. And so we look at images for that kind of stuff.
What sort of other machine learning or artificial intelligent model architectures do you use, like besides simple feed-forward neural networks, or that you've made?
I mean, for me personally, I use a lot of correlation analysis, which is pretty rudimentary. And so I'm looking at creating a lot of Bayesian inference networks rather than getting into machine learning. But I know a lot of the others, they're using, they're looking at graph theory, they're looking at lasso, there's all sorts of different things. If it exists, we've probably tried it, because that's sort of where we're at and what my lab likes to do.
More for my own clarification. So these graphs, you basically just use basic chemistry principles, and like X happens, Y happens?
So it depends, and then it always depends. So like the neural networks, we're actually putting in a lot of imaging, and we're layering images on top of each other. So they're doing a lot of picking up of what just the brain looks like and picking pinpoints. For the things that I do, because I'm trying to actually cross layers, there's all sorts of complications with that, where there's like nitty-gritty statistical distributions are different. One's a count, one's continuous. It creates a nightmare behind the scenes. And with that, then sometimes you're stuck with just doing correlation, where I see that this is associated with this, but not necessarily causal. And I don't necessarily care on the front end, for lack of a better term, if something's causing something, because I'm trying to get the data to tell me that. I don't want to necessarily go in with a very specific idea of what's going to happen. I want to try to be as unbiased as I can be about where the data is headed. But obviously, you have some thoughts.
So how many hours a day do you sit at the computer, and what sorts of things take you away from the computer that you do that's not computer-based in your job?
I mean, I'd like to say I sit there for 8, but it's probably longer. Because I feel like you get sucked in, and then that's that. But I actually do wet lab work, so I actually was trained as a wet lab scientist first. And then I moved into this, so I dissect mice, and I go do that, and I meet with students, and I teach them how to do this stuff. There's meetings, there's, the usual stuff of a business. But even at my computer, it doesn't all look like that. Like, I make websites to disseminate my data, and I get to make them look pretty and fancy and make lots of figures, and so, but it does mostly require my computer.
Thank you, Anne.